The man at the bus stop, I see him almost every morning. He stands at the same bus stop across the street from my apartment, holding a folded newspaper. He never reads it, just holds it, looking straight ahead. At first I thought he was waiting for the bus like everyone else, but I started leaving at different times, earlier and later, and he was always there. Same spot, same clothes, same posture. Last week I left for work around noon instead of my usual 8 a.m. He was still standing there. No bus schedule runs that late. Curiosity got the better of me, so I crossed the street to ask if he was okay. When I got close enough to speak, I realized something strange. He wasn't standing on the sidewalk. His shoes were about 2 inches above it. I blinked, and he was gone. Now, every morning when I look out my window, I still see the newspaper on the ground, folded neatly in half. The wrong number. About a month ago, I started getting calls from the same number every night around 2 a.m. At first, I ignored them. No voicemail, just silence when I picked up. One night, curiosity got the best of me. I answered and said, "Hello?" There was static for a few seconds, then a voice whispered, "Why did you move the picture?" I froze. I hadn't moved any pictures. I hung up, checked the house, and everything was normal. But the next morning, one of the framed photos in my hallway was lying on the floor. It wasn't broken, just neatly placed face down. I blocked the number, but the calls kept coming, showing up as no caller ID now, and last night I got another one. This time the voice said, "You put it back in the wrong place." The rest stop. I was driving back from visiting my parents, a 6-hour trip through mostly empty countryside. It started raining about halfway, so I pulled into a rest stop to stretch my legs. There was only one other car there, an old blue sedan parked a few spaces away. The lights inside were on, but the windows were fogged. I assumed someone was napping, so I went inside the restroom. When I came back out a few minutes later, the rain had stopped and the blue car was still there. Same spot, engine running. But now the driver's door was wide open. I looked around, called out a quiet, "Hello?" No answer. Something about the air felt wrong. It wasn't cold, but I got goosebumps anyway. Then I noticed something that made me leave immediately. There were 2 sets of wet footprints leading away from the car, and only one set coming back. The apartment above. I live on the top floor of a small apartment building. There's no attic, no roof access, and definitely no apartment above mine. But sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps, soft, slow, like someone pacing from one corner of the ceiling to the other. It's not pipes or old wood. It's too deliberate. I tried recording it once. When I played it back, I didn't hear the footsteps. Just a faint voice whispering something like numbers. I could make out 4, 8, 1. Last week, the ceiling light in my hallway started flickering. I climbed a chair to check the bulb and noticed faint scratches in the plaster right above it. Tiny numbers carved into the ceiling. 481. That night, the footsteps stopped. But every morning since, my alarm goes off at exactly 4:81 a.m., which isn't even a real time. The voice by the window. I moved into this apartment about 2 months ago. It's on the 5th floor, small but cozy, with one big window overlooking the street. I leave it cracked open at night for some air. A few weeks ago, I woke up to someone whispering my name. Not loud, not panicked. Calm, almost gentle. I thought it was a dream at first until I heard it again, clearer this time. "Are you awake?" I froze. The voice was right outside the window. I live 5 floors up. I turned on the light and walked over slowly. The street below was empty, quiet. No cars, no people, just the sound of the wind. Then, right before I closed the window, the whisper came again. Not from outside this time, but from behind me. The photo on my desk, I work in an office where everything looks the same. Same cubicles, same coffee smell, same small talk. One morning I came in and noticed something new on my desk. A small framed photo. It was me, sitting at my desk, smiling. The picture looked recent. Same clothes, same haircut, but I don't remember ever taking it. There's no reflection of a camera and no one else in the shot. I asked around, but nobody admitted to putting it there. My boss said it must have been a joke, but told me to keep it. Nice photo. You look happy. That evening, I stayed late. When the office was empty, I looked closer at the picture. On the edge of the frame, just barely visible in the reflection of my computer screen, someone was standing behind me. The next morning, the photo was gone, but a new one was in its place. Same desk, same smile, different shirt. The candle in room 9. I stayed at a small bed and breakfast while traveling for work. It was the kind of place that tried to feel cozy but ended up feeling too quiet. The owner was friendly, maybe too friendly, and gave me room 9 at the end of the hall. The room was fine. One bed, a wooden desk, a single candle in a glass holder by the window. When I asked about the candle, the owner smiled and said, "It helps guests sleep. Just let it burn." That night I left it lit for a while, then blew it out before going to bed. A few hours later I woke up. The room smelled like melted wax. The candle was burning again. I checked the window. Still closed. The wick looked untouched, brand new, but the flame was steady. The next morning I mentioned it at breakfast. The owner's smile faded a little. He said softly, "You shouldn't have blown it out." When I got back to my room, the candle was gone. In its place was a fresh holder. Same glass, same color. Only now it was half melted. The field of whispers. When I was in college, my roommate invited me to her family's farmhouse for a weekend. It was deep in the countryside. No neighbors for miles, just fields and wind. The first night we sat outside by a small fire. At some point she told me to listen carefully. I thought she meant the wind in the grass, but after a moment I heard it. Soft voices, hundreds of them, rising and fading like breathing. I asked what it was. She said, "The field remembers things. You'll get used to it." Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside was still whispering, and I started to pick out words. They weren't clear, but I heard my name more than once. The next morning, I asked her again. She just said, "It only remembers the ones who listen back." When we left 2 days later, I looked back at the field from the car window. The grass was completely still, but the sound was coming from inside the car now. The street light. There's a street light outside my bedroom window. It's been there for as long as I've lived here. Same orange glow, same faint buzzing sound at night. Last week it started flickering. At first I thought it was just old wiring, until I noticed it only flickered when I walked past the window. Every single time. Out of curiosity, I stood there for a minute, watching the light blink on and off like it was reacting to me. Then it went completely dark. I waited. After a few seconds, it turned back on. This time, there was a shadow on the pavement, not mine. The photo booth. My friends and I went to the mall last month and used one of those old photo booths, the kind that prints out 4 small pictures on a strip. We all squeezed in, laughed, made stupid faces. When the photos came out, the first 3 were normal. The 4th one showed us still smiling, but there was a 5th person standing behind us. None of us saw anyone come in. And the weirdest part, in that last photo, all of our faces are slightly turned toward the stranger, like we were posing with him. We went back the next day to show the booth to the staff. They said it hadn't worked in over a year. The forest behind the house. When I was growing up, our backyard ended in a line of trees that stretched for miles. We always called it the forest, but it wasn't really that big. More like a long patch of wilderness that separated the town from the river. My mom never let me go there after dark. She used to say the woods changed at night. As a kid, I thought she meant it just looked scarier in the dark, until the night I ignored her. I was 16 coming home late from a friend's house. The shortcut went through the edge of the forest and I figured, what's the harm? I'd walked there plenty of times in daylight. Halfway through, I realized how quiet it was. No crickets, no wind, just the crunch of my own steps. Then I heard it. Footsteps behind me, perfectly matching mine. I stopped. They stopped. I took one slow step forward, another behind me. It felt like the sound wasn't coming from someone, but from the trees themselves, like they were echoing me, step for step. I broke into a run and didn't stop until I saw the light from my house. When I looked back, the forest was still and silent again. The next morning, my mom didn't ask where I'd been. She just said, "That's why the path is gone." When I checked, there really wasn't a path anymore, just wild grass and uneven ground as if no one had ever walked there. The Polaroid. My dad used to collect old cameras. He had this box full of vintage ones, mostly broken. Film types, Polaroids, the kind that click loudly and smell faintly of dust. A few months after he passed away, I decided to test one of them. It still had a film cartridge inside, so I figured I'd take a few pictures and see if it worked. The first shot came out blank. Expected. The second one showed my living room, though a bit blurry. But the third had something strange. It was my kitchen, same as ever, except there was someone standing in the corner. A figure, tall and thin, completely blacked out, no face, no features. I thought maybe it was a shadow, until I noticed that the figure's hand was resting on my shoulder. I took another picture immediately, but this time the photo came out empty again. No figure, no shadow, just the kitchen. Later that night, I put the Polaroid back in the box. The next morning, I found it sitting on my table, a new photo sticking out halfway. It was my bedroom, and I was asleep. The neighbor in 103. When I first moved into my apartment building, everything seemed normal. Quiet neighbors, friendly landlord, the usual city noise at night. My unit was 102, and across the hall was 103. Door always locked, blinds always drawn. For the first few weeks, I thought it was vacant. Then one night, I heard someone humming from inside. Not music, not a tune, just a slow, low hum that seemed to follow a rhythm, like breathing turned into a song. Every night after that, around the same time, 2:45 a.m., the humming started. Sometimes soft, sometimes louder, like whoever was inside was walking closer to the door. I asked the landlord if someone new had moved in. He looked at me strangely and said, 103's been empty since last year. I told him about the sounds and he shrugged. You probably hear the plumbing. But it wasn't plumbing. The next night I pressed my ear against the door. The humming stopped. Then a voice whispered, right next to the wood, you're early tonight." The next morning, the door to 103 was wide open. Inside, the room was stripped bare. No furniture, no carpet, just a layer of dust. In the center of the floor was a single black hair tie, and next to it, a coffee mug from my kitchen. The storage unit, I work for a moving company. We get hired to clear out storage units that haven't been paid for. Basically, forgotten stuff. Last month, we opened one that was already half empty. No furniture, no boxes, just a single wooden chair in the middle, facing the door. There was a dust everywhere except for a clean circle around the chair, like someone had been sitting there recently. We took a few photos for inventory, and when I checked my phone later, there were 6 pictures. I only took 5. The extra one showed the same chair, but the door was closed behind it, and there was a shadow on the floor. Mine, standing right next to the chair. Only I wasn't there when that photo was taken. The man at the crosswalk. There's a small intersection near my neighborhood. All traffic lights, barely working. The kind that take too long to change. Every night around the same time, a man stands at the crosswalk. He's tall, wears a long coat, and never moves. He just waits for the light to turn green, even when there are no cars for miles. People say he's been there for years. Different nights, same hour, same posture. The city cameras caught him once, but when they zoomed in, his face was blurred. Not like bad focus, like it wasn't there. I used to think it was just an urban myth. Then one night, walking home late, I stopped at that same intersection. The light turned red and I saw him, standing on the other side, still as stone. The air went cold and I heard him whisper, "Not yet." The light turned green. He didn't move, but when I passed him, there was no one there. Just the smell of wet asphalt and faint footprints leading into the street. The static room. I don't know how to explain this. It happened 2 weeks ago, but I haven't been able to sleep properly since. I was staying at a motel off the highway. Old place, cracked walls, TV from the 90s with one of those big boxy screens. When I checked in, the guy at the desk told me, "Don't turn on channel 9. It doesn't work." Of course I did. At first it was just static, normal. Then, after a few seconds, the image flickered and I saw what looked like the same motel room, only darker, like the lights were off. In the TV version of the room, someone was sitting on the bed, head down, completely still. I turned around. My bed was empty. When I looked back at the TV, the person was standing closer to the screen. I unplugged the TV, but it stayed on for another 5 seconds, just long enough for the figure to lean forward and whisper something I couldn't hear. When I plugged it back in later, channel 9 was gone. It skipped straight from 8 to 10. But sometimes, when I pass a motel on the road, I swear I hear static again, even when the TV isn't on. The last shift I worked night maintenance at a retirement home for about 2 years. It wasn't bad. Quiet, routine, the same hallways and the same few residents awake after midnight. Most of them couldn't sleep well, so I'd just smile, check the lights and move on. One night I was fixing a flickering bulb in the east wing. The hall was empty. No nurses, no sound. Then I heard a TV. Old, muffled like an old program from the 70s, room 112. That room had been empty for months. The last resident, Mrs. Keller, passed away there. When I opened the door, the TV was on, showing static. The recliner was facing it, the same chair she used to sit in. The room smelled like her perfume. And right as I reached to unplug the TV, a voice behind me said, "Could you turn it down a little, dear?" I turned, no one, but the chair was slowly rocking. The next day I asked the head nurse about it. She sighed and said, "It's fine. It happens sometimes. Just say goodnight and leave the set alone." I quit 2 weeks later. Found note, room 112. 2 years after they renovated the east wing, the new staff started clearing out old furniture. They found a folded piece of paper wedged under the seat of a recliner in room 112. It said in shaky handwriting, "I don't want to disturb her anymore. The light keeps going out by itself. I hear her watching her shows again. I told her I'd turn it down, but now she's the one asking me to." No one knows who wrote it. The ink was still fresh. The path that wasn't there. Yesterday behind my house, there's a small patch of forest. And nothing special, just a few trees and a dirt trail that leads to a creek. I walk there every evening with my dog. The path has always been the same. Last week I noticed something strange. There was a fork in the trail that hadn't been there before. A narrow dirt path veering off to the right between two trees that I swear used to be closer together. My dog refused to go that way. He just stood there growling, not barking, just low and steady. I decided to check it out alone the next morning, thinking maybe it was made by local kids or animals. The new path went deeper than I expected. It twisted oddly, like it didn't quite belong there. Then I reached a clearing I'd never seen before. In the center was a single wooden bench, covered in moss facing the trees. When I turned around to head back, the path behind me was gone. Just grass and leaves, no sign of where I'd come from. It took me over an hour to find my way out again. When I finally reached the creek, the sun was already setting. The next day, I went back with a friend to show him. The path wasn't there anymore, and neither were the two trees. The family photo. A few years ago, my sister found an old photo album at a yard sale. It was full of random pictures. Kids, birthdays, picnics, that sort of thing. None of us recognized the people, but it had a weird charm, so she kept it on her shelf. One night she called me over. She said she noticed something strange in one of the pictures. It was a photo of a family of 4. Parents, a boy and a girl, standing in front of a house. In the background, through the window, you could see a dark figure standing inside, watching them. It looked like a man in a suit, but the face was too blurry to make out. She thought it was just coincidence, a reflection or something. But when we looked through the rest of the album, that same man appeared in every photo, always in the background. Sometimes through a window, sometimes behind a tree, sometimes standing near the edge of the frame. The final photo was different. It showed the same house again, but empty this time, and the man was standing in the doorway. The next morning, my sister called me crying. She said she woke up and found the photo album open on her nightstand. The last picture was missing, the hotel room smell. I travel a lot for work, and I've stayed in more hotels than I can count. They all blend together after a while. Same beige walls, same hum from the AC. Last winter, I checked into a small hotel outside the city. The guy at the front desk gave me room 308. The room looked normal, clean, quiet, a little outdated, but fine. The only thing was the smell. It wasn't bad, just strange, like old flowers mixed with something metallic. I thought maybe the carpet cleaner they used was weird, so I didn't think much of it. But that night I woke up around 2 a.m. The smell was stronger, sweet and sharp at the same time. It filled the whole room. I turned on the light, but nothing looked out of place. Then I noticed the closet door was slightly open. I reached to close it, and the smell hit me like a wall. Rotten flowers, iron, and dust. The air felt heavier, like someone was standing behind the door. But when I opened it, there was nothing inside. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I asked the receptionist if they'd had plumbing issues or mold. He hesitated for a second, then said, "Oh, you were in 308? I nodded. He said quietly, "That room's supposed to be closed. We haven't rented it out since last year." The visitor at the window. When I was 9, my bedroom faced the backyard. There was a small tree right outside my window, short enough that I could climb it, tall enough that it brushed against the glass when the wind blew. One night, I woke up because of that sound. I thought it was just the branches again, until I realized the tapping was coming from inside the room. It wasn't loud, just a soft, rhythmic tap, like someone was trying to get my attention. I sat up, turned on my lamp, and saw a shadow move past the window. I ran to my parents' room and told my dad someone was outside. He grabbed a flashlight and went to check. No footprints, no signs of anyone there. He told me it was the tree and went back to bed. The next morning, I looked at the window from the outside. There were no branches close enough to touch it. They'd been trimmed the week before. And on the glass, just at eye level, there were 5 clear fingerprints pressed into the dust. Too large to be mine. The car in the rearview mirror. It happened last summer, driving home from my cousin's wedding. It was close to midnight, and I was on an empty stretch of highway that cuts through farmland. No lights, no houses, just road. About half an hour in, I noticed headlights behind me. They were far away at first, then slowly got closer. I figured it was someone passing through like me, but the car stayed right behind me. Same distance, same speed. Every time I sped up or slowed down, they did the same. I tried switching lanes. They followed. I couldn't make out the model. The lights were too bright, like high beams, but there was no shape behind them. Just light. After about 20 minutes, I took an exit to lose them. The car stayed on the main road and disappeared. I pulled over to breathe and looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. When I got home, I checked my dashcam footage. It recorded fine, up until the moment I noticed the headlights. Then the screen filled with static for 20 minutes straight. When the picture came back, I was already parked in front of my house. The bedroom clock. When my grandfather died, my mom brought home the old clock from his living room. A wooden, ticking one that chimed every hour. She said it made her feel like he was still around. We kept it in the hallway outside our bedrooms. At first it was comforting. Then I started noticing the time never matched the rest of the clocks in the house. It was always 3 minutes slow. I tried adjusting it, but it kept drifting back, 3 minutes behind. Always. One night I woke up because I heard it chime. 3 dull notes. But when I looked at my phone, it wasn't an hour mark. It was 3:03 a.m. The chime echoed longer than usual, like the sound didn't want to end. The next morning, my mom asked if I'd heard it too. I nodded. She said, "It stopped working after your grandfather passed. It doesn't even have a key anymore." That night, it chimed again. 3 slow notes, and then something else, a whisper between each one. I don't know what it said, but ever since then, it's been perfectly on time. The field behind the farm. My uncle used to own a small farm out in the countryside. When I was a kid, we'd visit every summer. Long days, warm nights, crickets, and the smell of hay everywhere. There was a huge open field behind the barn that he never let us play in. He said the ground wasn't safe, that there were old sinkholes. I never questioned it until one night years later. I was helping him fix the fence near the edge of that field. The sun had gone down, but I saw lights moving out there, faint white glows that drifted slowly above the grass. At first I thought they were fireflies, but they were too big, too steady, almost like lanterns being carried by invisible hands. My uncle saw them too. He just muttered, "Go inside," and turned away. Later that night I woke up to voices outside, soft, low, like a group of people talking somewhere far off. I looked out the window. The field was covered in the same lights, dozens of them all spread out evenly, like they were marking something underground. The next morning, the grass in that field was flat, pressed down in perfect circles. My uncle burned the entire field a week later. He never said why. When I asked, he just said, "It's better when they don't remember the way back." The recording I use one of those sleep tracking apps that records noises during the night, snoring, movement, things like that. I started using it a few months ago just to check if I talked in my sleep. Most nights it's boring, just white noise or the sound of me turning over. But one morning I woke up and saw a 3-minute clip saved around 3:27 a.m. The file name just said detected sound. I played it. For the first few seconds, nothing, just breathing, probably mine. Then another voice said quietly, "Are you awake yet?" I stopped it immediately, checked the apartment, locked, windows shut. I live alone. I deleted the file, uninstalled the app, and tried not to think about it. 2 nights later, I got a push notification on my phone. New audio detected, 3:27 a.m. The app had reinstalled itself, and when I opened it, there was just one recording. The first 3 seconds were silence, then a whisper, "Don't delete me again." 1. The door that whispered. I grew up in a small house built sometime in the 1950s. The hallway had this one old wooden door that never quite closed all the way. When the wind blew, it made a low creaking sound like someone breathing. One night I woke up to that sound again, but the air was completely still. No wind, no movement, just the sound, slow, rhythmic, right next to my room. I got up, opened my door, and looked down the hall. The old wooden door was slightly open, and from the crack came a soft voice like someone whispering a word over and over. I thought it was my dad sleep-talking, but when I called out, the sound stopped instantly. The next morning, my parents said they'd heard it too, every night since we moved in. They told me it was just the pipes, but the thing is, that door doesn't have any pipes behind it. It opens to a blank wall. 2. The baby monitor. A friend gave me an old baby monitor when my daughter was born. It's one of those cheap analog ones with static and no camera, just sound. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the monitor crackling. Then I heard breathing, slow, deep breathing that definitely wasn't my baby's. It stopped for a moment, and then a voice whispered, "She's awake." I jumped up, ran into her room. She was fast asleep. Monitor silent. I brought it back to my room, turned it off. But even unplugged, it hissed. And through the static, I heard a second whisper, closer this time. "She's not." 3. The passenger seat. When I was 17, I used to borrow my mom's car to drive to my part-time job. It was an old silver sedan, nothing fancy, but it always smelled like her perfume, a mix of lavender and something sweet. One night I was driving home after a late shift. Empty road, windows down, radio low. Then I smelled it. That perfume. Stronger than usual. I glanced at the passenger seat and for a split second I swear someone was sitting there. Just a shape. A head turned toward me. Faint reflection of eyes in the dashboard light. Then it was gone. When I told my mom the next day, she went quiet. Then she said, "I used to drive your grandmother home in that car. She wore that same perfume." 4. The call from apartment 2B. I work the night desk at an old apartment building. Half the units are empty, and the security cameras only cover the first floor. Last month, around 2 a.m., the phone rang. It was the intercom system. Call from apartment 2B. Thing is, 2B's been empty for 6 years. The tenant died there. I hesitated, then picked up. At first, nothing. Just a faint crackling like breathing through static. Then a voice said very softly, "Can you please tell them I'm still here?" I hung up, checked the line. No signal, no number, no power running to that unit. Next morning, I checked the building logs. Call duration, 2:13, and under origin, it said simply, 2B active. 5. Security footage from last night. I work as a night shift security guard for a storage facility. There's not much to do except walk around, check locks, and watch the monitors. Last week, around 3:30 a.m., I noticed motion in one of the units, number 47. It's been empty for months. The feed showed a man standing inside, facing the camera, completely still. No tools, no flashlight, just standing there. I radioed my coworker to check it out. He went down, opened the door, and said, "There's no one here." I looked back at the screen. The man was still there, same position, behind my coworker. I yelled into the radio, "Turn around." He did, and the screen went black. When it came back on, the unit was empty again. The log still shows motion detected in Unit 47 at 3:33 a.m. and under camera status. Manual restart initiated. But I didn't touch anything. 6. The man on the side of the road. It happened about 6 years ago. I was driving home from my girlfriend's house. Long, empty highway, middle of the night. About halfway through, I saw a man walking along the shoulder. Nothing weird about that at first, except he was walking toward me, in my lane, barefoot, head down. I slowed down, thinking maybe he needed help. When I got close, he lifted his head, and his face was completely blank. No eyes, no mouth, just skin. I swerved off the road and stopped. When I looked back, the road was empty. I called the police and they said I wasn't the first one to report a man walking on that stretch of highway. But every time they checked, there were no footprints. The door was already unlocked. I live alone. I always double-check the lock before leaving. It's a habit. When I turned the handle tonight, it opened without resistance. At first I thought maybe I forgot, but the lights were off and my shoes by the door had been moved. Not much, just shifted a few inches like someone stepped over them. I stood there for a minute, listening. Nothing. No sounds, no movement. I turned on the light. Everything looked normal except for one thing. On the kitchen table was a cup of coffee, still warm. The voice in the clock. When I was a kid, my grandparents had this big old pendulum clock in their living room. It chimed every hour, even through the night. One summer when I was staying there, the clock stopped working. My grandpa said it just needed winding, but he'd fix it tomorrow. That night around 2 a.m., I heard the chime again. But instead of the usual tone, it was a whisper. I couldn't understand the words, but it was definitely a voice. I went downstairs, The clock's hands were spinning backward, fast. The pendulum was still. I told my grandpa the next morning and he said, "That clock hasn't worked since your father was a boy." But when I looked again later, the time on the clock matched exactly when I'd woken up. 2:13 a.m., the window across the street. There's a house across from mine, empty for as long as I can remember. The curtains are always closed. Last night around midnight, I saw someone standing there. They weren't moving, just facing my window. I turned off my lamp to see clearer. The figure tilted its head, and then the curtain closed. This morning the house was still locked up. No footprints in the dust, but the curtain was open again, facing straight at my room. The reflection in the elevator. I work in an office building with those mirrored elevators, shiny enough to see yourself perfectly. Every night I'm the last one to leave. A few weeks ago I noticed something strange. When the doors closed, my reflection didn't move at the same time. It lagged for a split second, almost like it was watching me first. I tried recording it once. The video just showed a black screen, but you can hear me whisper, "Why isn't it moving?" Then, at the very end of the clip, there's a voice that isn't mine. It says, "Because you left first." The basement light. When I was 12, my family moved into a 2-story house with a basement. It wasn't creepy at first, just old. The kind of basement that smells like damp concrete and forgotten boxes. My dad used it for storage, but every night the light down there would be on. He blamed us, said someone kept forgetting to turn it off, but I started to notice something strange. It wasn't the same brightness every night. Sometimes it flickered faintly like a candle. Sometimes it was a steady glow. One evening, I decided to wait. I turned off the basement light, closed the door, and sat on the stairs in the dark. After about 5 minutes, I heard a faint click. The light came back on. I opened the door and saw the bulb swinging slightly, as if someone had just brushed past it. I told my parents, but they didn't believe me. So the next day, I unscrewed the bulb completely. That night, the light was still on, soft yellow, moving, coming from somewhere deeper in the basement, somewhere the light shouldn't reach. Years later, when the house was being renovated, the workers found a small room behind one of the walls, a dirt space about the size of a closet, and inside it, a melted candle, still upright. The answering machine. My mom kept an old landline phone in her bedroom long after everyone switched to mobile. She said she liked hearing real buttons click. It had one of those tiny answering machines with a red blinking light. After she passed away, I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. I left it plugged in the spare room. No one ever called it. No one even knew the number anymore. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of the tape rewinding. That soft whirring sound it used to make when she checked messages. When I went to look, the light was blinking again. It was a new message. I pressed play and her voice came through, calm, quiet, a little distorted. She said, "Don't forget the keys this time." I froze. That's what she used to tell me every morning before school. The timestamp said today, 3:21 a.m. I checked the phone line. It wasn't even connected to the wall. The next morning when I went back to check, the tape was blank, but the machine was still warm like it had just finished playing 11, the elevator that skipped a floor. I used to live in an old apartment building downtown, the kind with a noisy elevator and buttons that barely lit up. One night I was coming home late from work, around 1 a.m. The lobby was empty, lights dim, everything quiet. I pressed the button for the 4th floor, like always. The doors closed, the elevator started moving, But it didn't stop. It went past the 4th floor, then the 5th, and stopped between floors. No number showing on the panel, no sound except the fan humming. The doors slid open anyway. It looked like a hallway, but not mine. The walls were white and spotless, no apartment numbers, just doors, all closed. It didn't smell like paint or dust, just nothing. A kind of clean silence. I didn't step out. After maybe 5 seconds, the doors closed again, and when they opened next, I was on my usual floor. Everything exactly the same. The next morning, I told the building manager about it. He just laughed and said, "Yeah, the elevator's been weird since before the renovation. Sometimes it stops on what used to be the old 5th floor. We sealed it off years ago." 12. The static on Channel 8. When I was a kid, we had one of those old box TVs with the dial you had to turn by hand. My parents always told me never to mess with it too much because it was fragile. But when they'd go to bed, I'd sit in the living room, turning through channels quietly just to see what was on. One night, I landed on Channel 8. Nothing but static. Except it wasn't quite static. There was a faint sound under it, like someone whispering. I leaned closer and I could swear I heard a sentence, "Don't change it." I froze. The room was silent except for that low fuzzy noise, then again clearer this time. "Don't change it." I switched the dial immediately. All the other channels worked fine. The next morning I asked my dad if Channel 8 ever worked. He said, "There is no Channel 8. We only get up to 7 here." I didn't touch the TV again after that. But sometimes, when I walk past an old one in a thrift store, I still half expect to hear that same static, waiting for me to listen. 13. The umbrella on my porch. A few months ago, there was a storm that lasted the entire night. Heavy rain, thunder, wind strong enough to move trash cans down the street. The next morning, when I went outside to check for damage, there was an old black umbrella leaning perfectly upright against my front door. Not fallen over, not blown away, just standing there, dry. It wasn't mine. No one in my family owned one like that. It looked used, but not broken. Wooden handle, brass tip, fabric still stiff. I asked my neighbors if anyone had lost one. They all said no. I decided to leave it by the door for a few days, thinking maybe someone would come back for it. No one did. Then one evening, it started raining again. I looked out the window, and the umbrella was gone. Just like that. The ground was wet where it had been, but there were no footprints, no trail, nothing. It never showed up again. 14. The reflection that didn't move. This one still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. A few years ago, I was getting ready for work early in the morning. I walked past the mirror in my hallway, half asleep, coffee in hand. When I looked at it, something felt off. I couldn't tell what at first. Everything looked normal. Then I realized my reflection was standing still. I blinked, moved my hand. Nothing. The reflection just looked back at me, eyes focused, perfectly calm. It only lasted maybe 2 or 3 seconds before it caught up, mimicking me like normal again. I just stood there for a while, staring, trying to convince myself I was tired, imagining things. But later that week, it happened again. Same mirror, same thing, like a 1-second delay. I ended up moving that mirror to the attic. It's still there. And sometimes I wonder if, up there in the dark, summers ago, I went camping alone for the first time. It was a small forest preserve, not far from town, safe, nothing unusual. The first day was perfect. Clear sky, warm air, birds everywhere. Around sunset, I was cooking dinner by the fire when I noticed something strange. The sound of the forest just stopped. No birds, no insects, no wind. Even the fire seemed quieter, like the air had thickened around it. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I realized I could hear something faint in the distance, a slow rhythmic tapping, like wood hitting wood. 3 taps, pause, then 3 again. It went on for maybe a minute, then stopped, and just like that, the normal forest sounds came back all at once. Birds, crickets, everything, as if someone pressed unmute on the world. I didn't sleep much that night. When I went back in the morning, I found 3 sticks linked together near the tree behind my tent, perfectly balanced, like someone had built a small triangle just to be seen. 16. The light in the basement. I rent an old house that's been remodeled a few times, but the basement is still the original. Stone walls, old pipes, single hanging bulb. I almost never go down there except to check the fuse box. One night, I got home late and noticed a faint glow coming from the basement door window. It looked like the light was on. I knew I hadn't turned it on that week. I went down to check, but the light switch was already off. The bulb itself wasn't glowing anymore, but the corner of the basement, the far left, looked slightly illuminated, like there was another light source behind the wall. I checked the outside of the house. No windows, no power lines, nothing that could have cast it. The next day I mentioned it to the landlord. He said, "Yeah, that's been happening for years. There used to be another part of the basement before we sealed it. Sometimes the light still leaks through." That night I went back down once more. The corner was dark again, but the air felt warm, like a bulb had just gone out. 17. The clock that skipped a minute. I've had the same wall clock in my living room for years. A simple, cheap one with a quiet tick. It's never been accurate, but it's reliable enough. One night I was sitting on the couch half watching TV and I noticed something odd. The second hand had stopped. Not broken, just frozen at the number 12. After about 10 seconds it started moving again, but the minute hand had already jumped forward. It was 12:16 when it stopped, and 12:18 when it started again. I checked my phone. It said 12:15. The time between them just didn't exist. At first I thought maybe the battery was dying, so I replaced it the next morning. But then it happened again. Same thing, same missing minute. It's always the same time, too, around 12:17. I even filmed it once, but the video file ended up corrupted right when the clock froze. I don't think it's broken. I think it's skipping something I'm not supposed to see. 18. The text that sent itself. Last year I was texting with my best friend late at night. We were talking about some old memories, laughing about things that happened years ago. I typed, "Do you ever think about how different life is now?" and hit send. About 10 seconds later, I got a reply that said, "Sometimes, but it's okay. We'll talk about it soon." Before I could respond, a notification popped up. Message failed to send, and the text I just received disappeared. I checked the thread. It wasn't there. No sent message from me, no reply, nothing. The next morning I told my friend about it. He said he hadn't been on his phone that night. He'd fallen asleep around 10. I showed him my message history. The only thing left from that time was a blank space between 2 timestamps. phone had skipped a single exchange. Every now and then, I scroll back to that gap, half expecting the message to reappear. It never does. 19. The street that wasn't there. This happened about a year ago when I was driving home from work. I take the same route every day. 10 minutes through town, 2 turns, done. That night I decided to take a small detour to grab a coffee. When I got back on the main road, something felt off. The houses looked familiar, but not quite right. Different paint, trees I didn't remember, and a strange silence like no cars existed anywhere else. I kept driving, thinking maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. Then I saw a street sign that said Maple Avenue, but there's no Maple Avenue in my town. I pulled over, opened Google Maps. My location dot was just floating in a blank space. No roads, no labels. It stayed that way for maybe 30 seconds. When I looked up again, the street ahead of me looked normal. Same shops, same lights, everything back to how it should be. I checked my map again. Now it showed my usual route, no sign of Maple Avenue. I've driven that road hundreds of times since then. It's never happened again, but every time I pass that corner, my GPS lags for just a few seconds. 20. The conversation that already happened. A few months ago, I was talking with a coworker during a break. Nothing deep, just random stuff about the weekend, a movie we'd both seen. We wanted to travel someday. Halfway through the chat, I suddenly felt this weird sense of recognition. Not just deja vu, but full awareness of what he was about to say next. Word for word. I tested it. I asked him a question I remembered asking before. He gave the same answer, the same laugh, and even looked down at his phone at the exact same second. It only lasted maybe a minute, but it felt like I was watching a replay of something I'd already lived. Later that day, he texted me. Weird question. Did we have this exact conversation last week? I told him no, but deep down, I knew we both felt it. Now every time we talk, there's this small pause, like we're waiting to see if it'll happen again. The last call. About 3 years ago, I lost my uncle. We were close. He was the kind of person who'd call just to check if you'd eaten that day. A few days after the funeral, I was lying in bed, half asleep, when my phone started buzzing. Private number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. There was static for a second, then a familiar voice said quietly, "Hey, just making sure you're doing okay." It sounded exactly like him. Same tone, same rhythm. I froze, didn't know what to say. Then mine went silent. I checked the call log. No missed calls, no history, nothing. I called my carrier the next morning, and they said no calls had been received at that time. I know what I heard. And the strange thing is, after that night, I stopped feeling so heavy about losing him. Like he really did check in one last time. 22. The train with no reflections. I take the subway to work every morning. Same train, same car, same window seat. It's routine at this point. One morning, the train felt quieter than usual. No chatter, no movement, just the sound of the tracks beneath us. I glanced at the window across from me and realized I couldn't see my reflection, or anyone's. The seats were full, but the glass showed nothing, not even the lights of the tunnel, just darkness. Nobody else seemed to notice. People were reading, scrolling, half asleep. The train slowed, doors opened, and new passengers walked in. Still no reflections. I switched seats, thinking it was the lighting. Same thing. notice it, just trees and shadows out the window. That night, though, I saw lights, small, warm ones floating just above the ground. Not candles, not flashlights, more like tiny orbs, glowing soft yellow, drifting slowly between the headstones. I slowed down, thinking maybe someone had put lanterns there for a memorial, but when I passed again the next evening, nothing. The place was completely dark. A week later, I mentioned it to a coworker who grew up in the area. He said, "Yeah, people see those sometimes, usually after a funeral. They say it's the way home for whoever's gone." I don't know if I believe that, but every time I pass the cemetery now, I turn down my headlights just in case someone's still finding their way. At 24, the girl in the raincoat. When I was 8, my parents used to pick me up from school every afternoon. We lived in a quiet suburb, long streets, lots of trees, nothing unusual. One day it started raining right before pickup, and I remember standing by the gate, waiting for my mom's car. Across the street there was a girl about my age, wearing a bright yellow raincoat, holding a blue umbrella. She looked at me and smiled, then lifted her umbrella and waved like she knew me. I waved back. My mom pulled up a minute later, and when I turned to look again, she was gone. I didn't think much about it until years later, when I was going through an old family photo album. There was a picture of me and my twin sister, the one who died when we were 3. She was wearing that same yellow raincoat. 25. The hotel room that wasn't booked. Last year I was traveling for work and stayed in a small hotel off the highway. Nothing fancy, old carpets, flickering hallway lights, the kind of place that always smells like coffee and dust. When I checked in, the clerk handed me a key card and said, "Room 217, up the stairs, end of the hall." I went up, found the room and opened the door. It looked fine. Bed made, lamp hung, even the mint window. Something about it felt lived in. There was a jacket hanging on the chair and the bathroom mirror was full, like someone had just taken a shower. I went back down to the front desk and said, "I think someone's already in 217. The clerk frowned, checked the computer and said, "Sir, we don't have a room 217. We only go up to 216. I walked back upstairs to show him, but the hallway ended at 216. No door after that, just a blank wall. 26. The message in the dust. A few years ago, my grandmother passed away, and I helped clean out her old house before it was sold. She lived there for almost 50 years. Tiny rooms filled with photos, teacups, and half-finished crossword puzzles. In her bedroom, the window had been closed for months. When I opened it to let in some air, a layer of dust lifted and swirled in the light. I started wiping down the dresser and noticed something strange in the mirror. A few faint words traced into the dust. "Don't forget the garden." I thought maybe my aunt had written it, but when I asked her, she said she hadn't touched the room yet. We went out to check the garden. It was overgrown, but under one of the rose bushes we found a small metal box wrapped in cloth. Inside were my grandmother's old letters. One of them addressed to me, written years ago, telling me to always keep something growing. The message on the mirror faded by the next day. We left the window open anyway. 27. The man who returned my wallet. About 5 years ago, I lost my wallet on the subway. I checked everywhere, under the seats, around the station, even called the transit office. Nothing. I figured it was gone for good. A week later, I came home from work and found a small brown envelope in my mailbox. Inside was my wallet. Everything's still there. house I remember. When I was little, my family moved around a lot. Different cities, different schools, always starting over. But there's one place that's stuck in my mind. A small white house with green shutters and a big oak tree out front. The thing is, my parents say we never lived there. I remember my bedroom perfectly. The wallpaper with clouds, the loose floorboard near the door, the sound of the tree tapping against the window when it rained. Once when I was about 12, we were driving to another town and I suddenly saw it. The same house, same tree, same everything. I asked my mom to stop, but she said, "We've never been here before." Years later, I went back on my own. The house was still there. The family was living inside. And in the front yard, under the oak tree, was a small wooden sign that said, "Welcome home. 1. The street light that blinked back." This happened about a year ago, but it's been stuck in my head ever since. I used to walk my dog every night around the same time, right after midnight. There's this one street light at the end of my block that always flickers a little, like the bulb's about to go out. One night, just for fun, I looked up at it and said out loud, "Hey, if you can hear me, blink twice." And it did. 2 short flickers, pause, then steady light again. I laughed it off at first, told myself it was coincidence. But I kept trying it. Sometimes it wouldn't react at all. Other times, it would blink exactly when I spoke to it. It became kind of a weird nightly ritual. I'd say goodnight, and it would give one short flash, like a reply. Then, one evening, I came home late, around 2 a.m. The streetlight was completely off. Next morning, I saw a city maintenance truck there, replacing the old bulb. Since then, the new one's been perfectly steady, and I don't know why, but every time I walk past it now, I still say goodnight, just in case it's still listening. 2. The car that followed me home. This happened a few months ago when I was driving home from work. It was around 1 a.m. No traffic, quiet roads. A few blocks from my house, I noticed a pair of headlights behind me. Nothing unusual until I turned left onto my street and the car did too. Then I turned again, a random loop through a few side streets, and it kept following. Same distance, same speed. No honking, no attempt to pass. Just quiet. I finally pulled into a gas station and parked near the front door. The car slowed down, passed by, and stopped at the intersection. Its brake lights glowed for a few seconds, then it drove off. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, just watching the empty road. When I finally got home, I checked my doorbell camera footage from that time, and there was nothing. Not just no car, no headlights, no movement, just me pulling into the driveway alone. I don't know what's weirder, that I imagined the whole thing, or that something followed me that didn't want to be seen. The knock at 317. This happened when I was living alone in a small basement apartment a few years ago. One night I woke up to this very quiet but distinct knocking sound. 3 slow knocks, pause, then another 3. I thought maybe it was pipes or something shifting in the walls, so I just stayed still and listened. But then it happened again. Same rhythm, same pause. I checked my phone. It was 3:17 a.m. No one I know would ever come by that late, and the front entrance was locked. The knocking continued for maybe a minute and then stopped completely. Silence. The next morning, I went outside to see if maybe someone had left a note or something. Nothing. No footprints, no marks on the door. Out of curiosity, I asked my upstairs neighbor if they'd heard anything. They said, yeah, around 3-something. It sounded like someone knocking from inside the walls. That apartment's been renovated finished, so I figured it would burn out soon. I sat there for a while, scrolling on my phone, half asleep. When I looked up, the candle was still burning. But here's the weird part. It hadn't melted at all, like the wax had stopped moving completely. The flame stayed the same size, steady and bright. I stared at it for a few minutes. No flicker, no change. Eventually I blew on it, and it didn't go out. Not right away anyway. Just dimmed for a second, then kept burning. It finally went out after I covered it with a glass jar. The next morning the wax was perfectly smooth. No wick, no melted edges, like it had never been lit at all. I still have that candle. I don't light it anymore though. It's just better that way. The time loop in the hallway. I used to work late nights at an office downtown. One night I was the last one there, finishing some reports before heading home. The building was quiet. Fluorescent lights humming, computers off. That kind of heavy silence you only get after midnight. When I finally left my desk, I walked down the hallway toward the elevator. About halfway through, I realized I'd forgotten my phone, so I turned around and went back. But when I got to my desk, my phone wasn't there. The screen was still lit up. A message I'd already read earlier that evening. But the time said 11:42 p.m. I looked at my watch. 12:17. Confused, I grabbed the phone and went back down the hallway. And there it was again. The same flickering light at the end. The same sound of the elevator doors opening. Only this time, there was no one there. When I got home, I checked my phone's clock, 12:17 again. But the timestamp on that message, 11:42. I don't really think about it much anymore, except sometimes when I walk through that same hallway. I get this weird feeling that I've already been there once before, just not quite the same way. 6. The neighbor who wasn't there. When I first moved into my apartment, I met the woman next door. She was older, maybe in her 70s, always wore a red sweater and had this tiny white cat that liked to sit on the windowsill. We only talked a few times, short conversations about weather, groceries, things like that. She seemed kind. A few weeks later, I noticed her apartment door slightly open. I knocked, but no one answered. Inside, I could hear a faint radio playing music, 1950s style, and the sound of that cat meowing. The next morning, I mentioned it to my landlord, and he looked at me for a second before saying, "That unit's been empty for months. The lady who lived there passed away last year." I told him about the cat, the red sweater, everything. He said, "She did have a white cat, yeah. We haven't found it since." That night I walked past her door again. It was closed, but through the crack at the bottom I could see the faint flicker of a radio light and hear that same quiet song playing again. 7. The alarm that rang before the storm. About 2 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my phone alarm. The weird part was, I didn't set one. It was exactly 3:28 a.m., and my alarm tone was something I'd never heard before. A strange, soft shine that didn't even exist in my phone's sound list. I turned it off, checked everything twice, and went back to sleep. 10 minutes later, thunder shook the house. The heaviest storm I've ever seen started. Lightning, rain, the whole thing. The next morning I checked my phone again. No alarm saved for that time, no record ever going off. The recent alarms section was empty. A few days later I mentioned it to a friend who works in weather research. He said that around 3:30 a.m. that night, a sudden electrical surge was recorded in our area, the kind that happened when I was visiting my cousin in the countryside last summer. His house sits near a large open field, and every evening I'd take a walk there just to enjoy the quiet. One night, as the sun was setting, I heard faint music, like an old radio playing somewhere out in the grass. At first I thought it was from a nearby house, but the sound seemed to move when I walked. I followed it, slow jazz, a woman's voice singing through static, until I reached the middle of the field. There was nothing there, no wires, no speakers, just wind and tall grass, but the song was clear. Then all at once it stopped. When I got back, I told my cousin, and he said, "Funny thing, my grandfather used to play his radio out there every evening before dinner. It broke years ago, but sometimes, when it's quiet enough, people say they still hear it." The next night I went back to the same spot. No music, just the sound of crickets, and a single flash of static like someone turning the dial one last time. 9. The candle in the window across the street. There's a small house across from mine that's been empty for years. The windows are always closed, blinds half torn, the kind of place that just fades into the background after a while. A few months ago I started noticing something strange. A single candle burning in the upstairs window. It wasn't there every night. Sometimes it appeared for a few minutes, sometimes for hours, always the same dim orange glow behind the curtain. I asked my neighbors if anyone had moved in. They said the house was still vacant. No one's rented it since the last owner passed away 5 years ago. I decided to check once just to make sure. Walked over around midnight. The candle was there, flickering like always. When I got close, I realized there was no curtain, no candle, and the window was covered in a thick layer of dust from the inside. I went home, looked out again through my own window, and the light was back, burning softly, as if someone was still keeping watch. 10. The door that opened by itself. I work night shift at a small grocery store. The store closes at 11 p.m., but I usually stay an hour longer to clean up and lock everything. It's quiet, just the hum of the refrigerators and the sound of my footsteps. There's a back door that leads to the delivery alley. Heavy metal, automatic lock takes effort to open. I always check it before leaving. One night as I was counting the register, I heard the sound of that door creaking open, slow, steady. Then the cold air rushed in. I walked back there with my flashlight. The door was wide open. No sign of anyone, no truck, no movement outside. I closed it, locked it again, even tugged on it twice to be sure. As I walked away, I heard it open again. The same long metallic sound. This time I didn't check. I just finished up, left through the front, and when I looked back before getting into my car, the alley was dark, the door closed. When I came in the next morning, the security camera facing that hallway had frozen at 12:03 a.m., the exact minute I'd heard the door open the second time. The man at the bus stop, I see him almost every morning. He stands at the same bus stop across the street from my apartment, holding a folded newspaper. He never reads it, just holds it, looking straight ahead. At first I thought he was waiting for the bus like everyone else, but I started leaving at different times, earlier and later, and he was always there. Same spot, same clothes, same posture. Last week I left for work around noon instead of my usual 8 a.m. He was still standing there. No bus schedule runs that late. Curiosity got the better of me, so I crossed the street to ask if he was okay. When I got close enough to speak, I realized something strange. He wasn't standing on the sidewalk. His pictures. I hung up, checked the house, and everything was normal. But the next morning, one of the framed photos in my hallway was lying on the floor. It wasn't broken, just neatly placed face down. I blocked the number, but the calls kept coming, showing up as no caller ID now. And last night I got another one. This time the voice said, "You put it back in the wrong place." The rest stop. I was driving back from visiting my parents, a 6-hour trip through mostly empty countryside. It started raining about halfway, so I pulled into a rest stop to stretch my legs. There was only one other car there, an old blue sedan parked a few spaces away. The lights inside were on, but the windows were fogged. I assumed someone was napping, so I went inside the restroom. When I came back out a few minutes later, the rain had stopped and the blue car was still there. Same spot, engine running. But now the driver's door was wide open. I looked around, called out quiet, "Hello?" No answer. Something about the air felt wrong. It wasn't cold, but I got goosebumps anyway. Then I noticed something that made me leave immediately. There were 2 sets of wet footprints leading away from the car, and only 1 set coming back. The apartment above. I live on the top floor of a small apartment building. There's no attic, no roof access, and definitely no apartment above mine. But sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps, soft, slow, like someone pacing from one corner of the ceiling to the other. It's not pipes or old wood. It's too deliberate. I tried recording it once. When I played it back, I didn't hear the footsteps. Just a faint voice whispering something like numbers. I could make out 4, 8, 1. Last week, the ceiling light in my hallway started flickering. I climbed a chair to check the bulb and noticed faint scratches in the plaster right above it. Tiny numbers carved into the ceiling. 481. That night, the footsteps stopped, but every morning since, my alarm goes off at exactly 4:81 a.m., which isn't even a real time. The voice by the window. I moved into this apartment about 2 months ago. It's on the 5th floor, small but cozy, with one big window overlooking the street. I leave it cracked open at night for some air. A few weeks ago, I woke up to someone whispering my name. Not loud, not panicked, calm, almost gentle. I thought it was a dream at first until I heard it again, clearer this time. "Are you awake?" I froze. The voice was right outside the window. I live 5 floors up. I turned on the light and walked over slowly. The street below was empty, quiet. No cars, no people, just the sound of the wind. Then, right before I closed the window, the whisper came again. Not from outside this time, but from behind me. The photo on my desk. I work in an office where everything looks the same. Same cubicles, same coffee smell, same small talk. One morning I came in and noticed something new on my desk. A small framed photo. It was me, sitting at my desk, smiling. The picture looked recent. Same clothes, same haircut, but I don't remember ever taking it. There's no reflection of a camera and no one else in the shot. I asked around, but nobody admitted to putting it there. My boss said it must have been a joke, but told me to keep it. "Nice photo. You look happy." That evening, I stayed late. When the office was empty, I looked closer at the picture. On the edge of the frame, just barely visible in the reflection of my computer screen, someone was standing behind me. The next morning, the photo was gone, but a new one was in its place. Same desk, same smile, different shirt. The candle in room 9. I stayed at a small bed and breakfast while traveling for work. It was the kind of place that tried to feel cozy, but ended up feeling too quiet. The owner was friendly, fresh holder, same glass, same color, only now it was half melted. The Field of Whispers. When I was in college, my roommate invited me to her family's farmhouse for a weekend. It was deep in the countryside. No neighbors for miles, just fields and wind. The first night we sat outside by a small fire. At some point she told me to listen carefully. I thought she meant the wind in the grass, but after a moment I heard it. Soft voices, hundreds of them, rising and fading like breathing. I asked what it was. She said, "The field remembers things. You'll get used to it." Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside was still whispering, and I started to pick out words. They weren't clear, but I heard my name more than once. The next morning, I asked her again. She just said, "It only remembers the ones who listen back." When we left 2 days later, I looked back at the field from the car window. The grass was completely still, but the sound was coming from inside the car now. The street light. There's a street light outside my bedroom window. It's been there for as long as I've lived here. Same orange glow, same faint buzzing sound at night. Last week it started flickering. At first I thought it was just old wiring, until I noticed it only flickered when I walked past the window. Every single time. Out of curiosity, I stood there for a minute, watching the light blink on and off like it was reacting to me. Then it went completely dark. I waited. After a few seconds, it turned back on. This time, there was a shadow on the pavement. Not mine. The photo booth. My friends and I went to the mall last month and used one of those old photo booths. The kind that prints out 4 small pictures on a strip. We all squeezed in, laughed, made stupid faces. When the photos came out, the first 3 were normal. The 4th one showed us still smiling, but there was a 5th person standing behind us. None of us saw anyone come in. And the weirdest part, the last photo, all of our faces were slightly turned toward the stranger, like posing with you. We went back the next day to show the booth to the staff. They said it hadn't worked in over a year. Party Schneen. The moment the noise stopped, inspired by IR Off My Chest and R Depression Recovery. For most of my life, there was always noise. Not from the outside, from inside my head. Endless thoughts, worries, arguments that never happened, regrets that never ended. Silence used to scare me because that's when the noise got louder. Then one evening, I was walking home after work. It had just rained. The streets were empty and everything smelled like earth and calm. No cars, no voices. Just the sound of my shoes against wet pavement. I stopped for a second and realized that for the first time in years, my mind was quiet, not peaceful, not happy, just still. It didn't last long, maybe a few seconds, but it was enough to remind me what peace feels like. Not the kind of peace you earn after solving your problems, but the kind that's already there, waiting under all the noise. Now, when the chaos starts again, I don't fight it as much. I just breathe. Remember that moment to tell myself the silence is still there. It never left. It's just patient. 10. The man who never stopped walking. Inspired by our Ask Old People and our life lessons. Every morning around 6 a.m., I'd see the same old man walking past my apartment. Rain or shine, summer or snow, he was always there. Same coat, same rhythm, same quiet determination. One day I decided to ask him why. He smiled and said, "Because I promised my wife I'd walk her home every day. She passed 10 years ago, but I still keep my word." At first I thought it was just devotion, but the more I saw him, the more I understood. He wasn't walking for her anymore. He was walking spent waiting for big moments, new cities, new jobs, new people, and how we overlook the small ones that quietly build us. The window in front of me had scratches from years of cleaning, the same scratches I used to complain about. But when the sun hit, them just right, they turned into gold lines, and I realized maybe life's like that too. The imperfections we hate are the same ones that let the light through. 2. The mountain waited. Inspired by our outdoors and our life lessons. When I was 20, I tried to climb a mountain with a group of friends. Halfway up, I gave up. I was tired, frustrated, embarrassed. They reached the top without me, and for years I couldn't stop thinking about that failure. 10 years later, I went back, alone. No goal, no one to impress. I just wanted to see how far I could go. The path hadn't changed, but I had. I took breaks. I noticed the sound of wind through the trees, the way the sunlight moved over the rocks, and slowly, step by step, I reached the top. There was no one there to clap or cheer, just silence and sky. I sat down and laughed because the mountain hadn't gone anywhere. It waited. All those years it just stood there, patient and still, waiting for me to stop running from myself. That's the thing about the things we fail at. They don't disappear. They wait for us to grow into the kind of person who can try again. 3. The friend who never texted back, inspired by our off my chest and our lost friends. A few years ago, one of my closest friends just stopped replying. No fight, no reason. The messages just ended. At first I thought something was wrong. Then I thought it was my fault. And after that I just stopped trying. Months later I found an old photo of us, laughing, holding cups of bad coffee at 2 in the morning, and I realized that something simple but hard to accept. Some people are chapters, not lifetimes. They don't leave because of you. They leave because their story needed to go somewhere else. I stopped resenting the silence after that. Now when someone fades away, I whisper a quiet thank you for the part they played, even if it was short, even if it ended without a reason. Not all unfinished things are tragedies. Sometimes they're just complete in their own way. 4. The day I stopped chasing happiness, inspired by I, self-improvement, and our depression help. For most of my life, I thought happiness was a destination, something you arrive at after fixing yourself, after the job, the relationship, the success, the right version of life. So I chased it, through achievements, distractions, people, noise, and the harder I tried to catch it, the faster it slipped away. Then one morning I woke up too tired to chase anything. I made coffee, sat down, didn't scroll, didn't plan, didn't analyze, just watched the steam rise from the cup. And for a few quiet minutes I felt something gentle, not joy, not excitement, just peace. And it hit me. Maybe happiness is a peak you reach, but the blind space that ends when you stop running. Since then, I don't chase it. I just move in silence, in ordinary mornings and moments that don't need to mean anything at all. 5. The old notebook, inspired by our nostalgia and our true off my chest. While cleaning my closet last winter, I found an old notebook from high school. It was covered in stickers and dust, the pages yellowed and soft at the edges. Inside were lists of dreams, song lyrics, tiny doodles, and notes from friends whose names I hadn't spoken in years. At first I laughed at how naive I sounded. I wrote about changing the world, about becoming someone great, about never losing hope. But as I turned each page, I felt something else. Not sadness, not regret, but tenderness. That version of me wasn't stupid. He was just trying to believe that everything would make sense one day. So I sat there on the floor, reading face, but now I think they're proof that I've been here, that I've lived through all the mirrors, and I'm still standing. 8. The woman who talked to the moon, inspired by poetry and lonely. When I moved to the countryside, my nearest neighbor was a woman in her 70s who lived alone with her dog. Every night I'd see her standing outside, looking up at the sky, whispering something I couldn't hear. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. I walked over and asked, "What are you saying up there?" She smiled without turning her head. "I'm talking to the moon," she said. I tell her about my day. I asked her if she thought the moon listened. She chuckled softly. Of course she does. She's been watching me longer than anyone else. After that, I started doing it too. Some nights I'd go outside and just talk. Not praying, not wishing, just talking. About the small things, the strange things, the things that never find their way into conversation. And in the quiet, I realized something she probably already knew. You don't always need someone to answer you. Sometimes it's enough to be heard by the sky. On Life Reflections of an Old Man, based on IRR Deep Thoughts. Now that I'm in my 70s, I find myself spending more time just sitting by the window, watching the light move across the room, listening to the clock tick. When I was younger, I thought life was about building something, a career, a legacy, a version of myself that people would remember. But the older I get, the more I realize that life isn't made of big, shining moments. It's made of the quiet spaces between them. I've lost people I thought I'd never live without. I've seen cities rise and fall, watched my kids become adults faster than I could understand. And now I know the meaning of it all isn't in what we achieve, but in how we exist. Presence matters more than purpose. At night, I don't remember awards or milestones. I remember the smell of fresh bread my wife used to bake, the warmth of my grandson's hand in mine, the sound of morning birds before the world woke up. If there's any wisdom left in me, it's this. Don't rush to make your life impressive. Make it real. Because one day when everything quiets down, you'll realize that peace was never in what you built. It was always in what you noticed. 2. A year of journaling based on our deciding to be better. A year ago, I started journaling every single day. It wasn't planned. I just needed somewhere to put my thoughts when my mind wouldn't shut off at night. At first, my notes were short, random sentences. Bad day, coffee helped. Or, why do I feel empty after a good day? But with time, the words grew heavier, more honest. I started noticing patterns, that every time I felt angry, it wasn't really anger. It was exhaustion. That every time I felt lonely, it wasn't because people didn't care. It was because I didn't reach out. Writing became a mirror. It didn't solve my problems, but it showed me where I was standing. And maybe that's what reflection really means. Not fixing yourself, but finally seeing yourself. After a year, I read through every page. There were bad days, good ones, and a lot that was simply okay. And I realized life will never be one long string of good days. It's a mix, 50% light, 50% shadow, and that's perfectly fine. Now, every night before bed, I write one line. Sometimes it's a sentence, sometimes just a word. But I like knowing my past self is waiting, reminding me that I've made it through everything before, and I'll make it through. sat in complete silence. No music, no phone, no distractions, just me and my thoughts. And it was uncomfortable, painfully uncomfortable. Because for the first time, I had no one else to point at. I started asking myself questions I never dared to before. Why do I get angry so quickly? Why do I chase people who clearly don't want to stay? Why do I keep running from quiet moments? The answers weren't pretty, but they were honest. That night turned into a habit. 10 minutes of silence each day. Not meditation, not even deep thinking, just honesty. And little by little I realized that every part of my life I had blamed others for was built by my own hands. It's strange how you can live with yourself for decades and still not know who you are. Once you do, once you really look, everything changes. You stop trying to control people and start learning to control your reactions. You stop demanding meaning from the world and start creating it. Self-reflection didn't make my life easier. It made it real. And in a world that constantly tells you to keep moving, that's the bravest thing you can do. To sit down and finally meet yourself. 4. The Taxi Driver's Lesson. Inspired by R. Ask Reddit, a stranger who changed your life. It was raining that night. I was sitting in the back of a taxi, scrolling through my phone, half listening to the sound of the wipers. The driver looked old, maybe in his 60s, quiet, focused on the road. After a few minutes, he spoke. "You look tired, son," he said. "A long day?" I nodded. "Yeah, long life too." He laughed softly. "That's how you know you're still in it." We drove in silence for a while before he continued. "You know, people think peace is something that comes after success. But peace isn't what you get after things work out. It's what you feel when you stop needing them to." He told me about his life, how he used to own a small restaurant, lost it after the pandemic, lost his wife a year later. Now he drove a taxi 6 nights a week. "But I'm still here," he said. "And that means I still get to try again tomorrow." When we reached my stop, I handed him the fare, but he waved it away. "Keep it," he said. "Buy yourself a coffee tomorrow morning and sit outside for 5 minutes before the world starts running again." I never saw him again, but I think about him often. Every time I drink my morning coffee, I sit for a while, and I try not to make peace something I'm chasing. I try to let it find me instead. 5. The man who said thank you to everything. Inspired by our true off my chest and our humans being bros. I once met a man who said thank you to everything. Not just the good things, everything. He thanked the bus driver for being late, the rain for ruining his plans, even the person who cut in line in front of him. At first I thought it was sarcasm, but one day I asked him why he did it. He smiled and said, "Because gratitude isn't about liking what happens. It's about remembering that it happened for me, not to me." He told me that years ago he lost his wife in a car accident. For months he hated everything. The noise of the city, the smell of rain, the sound of laughter. Then one day, while cleaning her things, he found a note she had written on the last page of her journal. It said, "Thank you for the ordinary days." He said that sentence changed him forever. Now, whenever something goes wrong, he says, "Thank you," because even pain is proof that life is still happening. I think about that often, and I try to remember to whisper it too. Thank you, even when it hurts, even when I don't understand, because gratitude, I think, is another way of saying, I'm still here. 6. My grandmother's unfinished painting. Inspired by R. Ask Reddit. What did you learn from someone who passed away? My grandmother used to paint every evening. She wasn't famous, not even close, but she painted like someone who believed beauty deserved to exist, even if no one saw it. When she passed away, we found one last canvas in her small studio. It was unfinished, half a garden scene, soft pinks fading into white. The brush was still resting on the table, stiff with dried paint. For months I couldn't stop staring at it. I wanted to finish it for her, to bring it to life the way she would have wanted. But every time I tried, I froze, because something about that half-finished painting felt right, like it was supposed to stay that way. One day, I realized why. That painting wasn't a mistake. It was a reflection of life itself. Always incomplete, always in progress. We never get to finish everything we start, and maybe that's not tragic. Maybe it's beautiful. Now it hangs in my living room, still unfinished. Whenever I feel lost, I look at it and remind myself, not everything needs an ending to have meaning. 7. When I realized my parents were people, inspired by art as credit. What's a realization that completely changed how you see your parents? I used to think my parents were unshakable, two solid figures who always knew what to do, what to say, where to go. When I was a kid, they were the entire universe. But one night, when I was about 20, I came home late. The lights were off except for the kitchen. My mom was sitting there, holding the cup of tea that had gone cold. She didn't hear me at first. She was just staring at nothing. Then she sighed, the kind of sigh that carries a lifetime in it. It wasn't sadness exactly, it was wait. For some reason, I didn't walk away. I sat across from her, and for the first time in my life, I saw her not as mom, but as a person. A woman who once had dreams that didn't involve me, fears I'll never know, and regrets she'll never say out loud. Later I started noticing it everywhere. My dad rubbing his temples after work, not because he was angry, but because he was tired. My mom staying quiet in conversations where she used to laugh, and suddenly I realized they were just doing their best, same as me. It's strange how long it takes to see the people who raised you as human. But once you do, love changes shape. It becomes softer, quieter, less about needing them to be perfect and more about forgiving them for being real. 8. The invisible kindness, inspired by art humans being pose and are, drew off my chest. A few years ago, I was going through a rough time, lost my job, ended a relationship. Everything felt heavy, and I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to sound like a burden. One morning I stopped at a small cafe I used to visit with my ex. The barista, a middle-aged woman with bright eyes, asked how I'd been. I just smiled and said, "Still standing." She nodded like she understood something I hadn't said out loud. When I got my coffee, there was a note on the cup. It said, "You don't have to be okay to keep going." I never told her what that meant to me, but that small kindness stayed longer than most of my friendships. Since then, I try to notice the quiet good things, the car that stops to let you cross, the stranger who holds the door, the smile from someone who doesn't owe you one. Most kindness in this world is invisible, and maybe that's what makes it so real. It's not about being seen. It's about leaving warmth behind when you're gone. Story 6. The train ride that changed nothing and everything. I came across this story from a man who once took an overnight train across the country. He wrote that it was one of those long, quiet rides where the hum of the wheels sounds like a heartbeat and everyone pretends to sleep. He was sitting by the window, watching the reflection of the carriage lights slide across the glass. It was raining outside, so laughed a little, surprised, and said she wasn't wrong. So she asked where he was headed. He told her the truth, that he didn't know anymore. She nodded, as if she'd heard that line 1,000 times. Then she opened her notebook, tore out a page, and handed it to him. On it, she'd written just one sentence. "You don't have to know how you're going to move forward." He said they talked for the rest of the night about their families, their mistakes, their regrets, and what they'd still like to see before it's too late. When the train stopped at her station, she wished him well and disappeared into the rain. He didn't even ask for her name. But when he unfolded the note again, he saw something he hadn't noticed before, a small drawing on the back. It was of a train window, with rain outside. He kept that note for years. He said it became his reminder that sometimes strangers arrive exactly when you need them, not to fix you, but to make you remember that you're still moving, even when it feels like you're standing still. He ended his story with these words: "That train ride didn't change my life in a dramatic way, but it changed how I looked at my life, and that was enough." Story 7. The Little Cafe That Remembered Me. I came across a story from a man who used to live in a small coastal town. He said there was a cafe on the corner of his street. Nothing fancy, just a place with mismatched chairs, a dusty jukebox, and the smell of cinnamon that always hung in the air. He went there every morning for years. Same order, same seat by the window. He didn't even have to ask. The barista, a woman in her late 30s named Claire, would see him walk in and start preparing his coffee before he sat down. He said they never really talked much, just small things. How's the weather? Rough morning? Big plans today? Those small exchanges became part of his routine, as reliable as the sunrise. Then one day, everything changed. His company went bankrupt and he lost his job. He had to move out of town and start over somewhere else. On his last morning there, he went to the cafe one final time. He tried to act normal, but when Claire handed him the cup, she looked at him and said, "You're leaving, aren't you?" He asked how she knew. She just smiled and said, "I can always tell when someone's saying goodbye." He left a generous tip, thanked her for all the mornings, and walked out feeling like he was leaving a small piece of himself behind. Years passed. He built a new life, new job, new city, new rhythm. But sometimes when life got overwhelming, he said he'd close his eyes and imagine that cafe, the smell of cinnamon, the sound of the bell above the door, and Claire's quiet smile. Then out of nowhere, work sent him back to that same town for a conference. He wasn't sure if the cafe would still be there. So one early morning, he decided to take a look. The town was smaller now, quieter, but the cafe was still there. Same faded sign, same old bell. He walked in, heart pounding, and before he could say a word, Claire turned from the counter. She looked older, but the same warmth was in her eyes. She smiled and said, "Your coffee, right? I haven't seen you in a while." He froze for a moment, then laughed. You still remember?" She poured the coffee and said, "Of course I do. Some people leave, but their mornings stay." He wrote that he never cried easily, but that day he almost did. He said he sat there for an hour, sipping coffee and watching the sun pour through the same window, feeling like he'd come home to a version of himself he thought was gone. He ended his post with this line: "Sometimes the world moves on, but a few places wait for us, quietly, patiently, until we're ready to return." Story 8. The Umbrella Man. streets with umbrellas, never looking up, never slowing down. She worked in an office near a crowded intersection, and every day she passed the same street vendor who sold cheap umbrellas, phone chargers, and bottled water from a small metal cart. He was always there, rain or shine. She said he looked like he'd been standing on that corner forever, an old man with a grey hat, a slow smile, and the calm patience of someone who had seen everything twice. Most people ignored him, but one day during a sudden downpour, her own umbrella snapped in the wind. She ran to his cart, drenched. He handed her a new umbrella, bright yellow, and said, "Pay me next time. He'll be back." She laughed and promised she would. And of course, she did. She said she began stopping by his cart almost every morning after that. Sometimes to buy something, sometimes just to say hello. He started saving her a banana from his lunch. She started bringing him coffee. It became a quiet friendship. Two people connected by the rhythm of the city and a shared umbrella on rainy days. Then one morning, he wasn't there. His cart was gone, and for weeks she didn't see him. She thought maybe he'd be tired or moved away. Months later, she noticed a small hand-painted sign taped to the pole near where his cart used to be. It said, "Thank you for every coffee, every smile, and for remembering my name. Sam." She stood there for a long time, reading it over and over. Later that day, she went to the florist nearby and bought a single yellow flower. She left it at the pole. Years passed, but she said she still